Good evening, everyone. Glad to have you with us tonight. We've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about quality hatching eggs and what you need to do to get them because good eggs give us good chicks, and that's what we all want to have is the best chicks possible. Um, we're going to try to follow the format we did last time where we just kind of all chimed in at odd times. So this may not be terribly structured. I see Karen's over there grinning. Um, but I just want to start out by mentioning a few things, and the rest of you feel free to chime in. But one of the most important things for me was always making sure my birds were healthy, not only disease free, but parasite free, both external and internal parasites. You want to be sure you check them over for that. Remember, anything that causes our birds to not be in the prime of health, whether it's disease or parasites or what, is going to impact the quality of your hatching eggs. So keep that in mind. Nest are another important thing. There's been some discussion on some of our groups talking about the best nest size, and that really depends on the size of your birds. Um, you look at a lot of the university publications and they say a 12 by 12-inch nest. Well, that's fine if you're talking about leghorns, but if you're talking about Brahmas or Cochins or Jersey Giants, they're going to feel like they've been jammed into a sardine can. So you want something more along the line of about a 16 by 16. So you're just going to have to judge it based on the size of your bird. Where do you put a nest? If you stop and think about it, when a hen's looking for a place to lay an egg, where does she go? Does she go out in the middle of the yard and lay an egg? No. She sneaks off into the never land out there and hides it. So if your nests are in a bright, sunny location, your birds are not going to want to use them. They want to feel secure. Um, I have seen photos, and I heard folks kind of joke about them a little bit, of folks making curtains to hang across the front of their nest boxes. Well, back in the day, I can remember when you ordered galvanized nest, and they came with curtains installed to give that little added feeling of security. Somebody asked me the other day, said, my chickens continually try to roost in my nest boxes. Why is that? And I asked her, I said, is which is higher, your roost or your nest boxes? She said, the nest boxes. I said, there is your problem. If your nest boxes are at a higher level than your roost, your birds are probably going to go up there to roost. So you want to keep them down below the level of your roost poles.
So, Rip, I want to add to your nest box
Yeah.
comments. I find that people put their nest boxes way too far off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the average hen only wants to go 18 to 24 inches. That's about all the further. And if they're much heavy, if they're real heavy breeds, over 10 pounds, even 18 inches may be too much. We tend to put nest boxes where they're convenient for us to gather the eggs.
Yep.
Not where they're convenient for the chicken to lay the egg. So, but I was taught by my mentor, a hen's looking for the darkest place in
Mm-hmm.
the egg house to lay her egg between 9 and noon every day, because the average chicken tries to lay an egg at 10 a.m. So just think about where you place that nest box. Um, I would put them on the east wall if it was me, because that's guaranteed to be your darkest location in the mornings. And I encourage everybody to put curtains on their nest boxes. So it's fairly easy. It stops peckouts. You won't have two hens in the same nest box, and they also won't spend the night in there. So you won't find them lounging around and roosting in a nest box with a curtain on it.
Absolutely. And that's some very good information. You were talking about the timing of the lay. Um, I don't know how long you've been involved in poultry, but does the name Monroe Babcock mean anything to you?
Just faintly. I don't know a lot about them. Yeah.
He founded Babcock Poultry Farms, and at one point was probably the largest producer of commercial white leghorns in the country. But I had the opportunity to meet with him and visit with him on several occasions. And he told me, he said, if you want to improve egg production in your birds, don't set any eggs that are laid after 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, you want a bird that lays early, gets off the nest, and goes about her business during the rest of the day.
Hold on, Rep. I want to talk about this for a second.
Lay it on us.
Because this is Dennis Deaver. So, oh no, wait, I think it is. Yes. So he wants to let everybody know that his girl lays eggs under the nest boxes. And that is a trouble I had too. So same as Jeff, I tried to move my nest box down. So I've now figured, like, if I go too far down, they're like tunneling under there and I can't get the eggs out. So now I go basically just the height that the bird is under there, and it's easy to collect the eggs. But yes, if you make a good spot under them, then that'll be more exciting than in them. So,
Karen, did you also have curtains on your nest boxes too? And they still went underneath it?
So many iterations of nest boxes. No, I would actually say that at that point there was not.
Okay.
No.
I didn't know if maybe they were going there for like the extra privacy.
Yeah. Well, and somebody, me, thought it would be fun to put all my nest boxes outside and not in the coops. So I'm still struggling fixing that mistake from everywhere. So
one last comment on nest, and that you want to be sure and keep them clean and sanitary, particularly if you've got birds, heaven forbid, that are trying to roost in those nest boxes. They're going to fill up with poop pretty quick. That's going to stain and contaminate your hatching eggs, and that's something you don't want. As far as to what to put in there for bedding, I used pine shavings for years and years and years, and then they finally came out with plastic AstroTurf, and I switched over to that and fell in love with it, because if it gets dirty, I can pull it out, run outside and hose it off real quick, let it sit in the sun for a few minutes, it's drying, and I just put it back in the nest box. And so that keeps things nice and clean.
Jeff, I got a quick question for you. We've talked about peat moss. Have you had anyone use peat moss in their nest boxes?
I have, and they really don't like it because for birds that lay eggs that have like a lot of bloom on them, the peat moss sticks to the egg, and it's almost impossible to wash off. So the only negative to peat moss is using it as nesting material, because it will, the fine particles of the peat moss and the bloom on the egg, which hopefully you have a really good bloom on your egg, but it sticks to the egg and makes a mess.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
We were having a discussion about this next subject here, and that's sex ratios. But and what I'm really talking about is how many females per male, or how many males per female. On large breeds, large fowl breeds, your dual purpose breeds and on up in larger birds, about 9 or 10 females has always been my max to get good fertility per male. With the breeding system I had, I only had about 4 or 5 females in a breeding pen, and so I was well within that guidelines. If you're using light breeds like Leghorns or something like that, the more active breeds, you can get by with 12 to 15 females per male and still get good fertility. Some people have run into the problem where they don't get good fertility, so they throw another male in there and their fertility really goes to pot, because the males are squabbling back and forth with each other and not paying attention and mating with the females. So you can't overdo males to females if you're not careful. Let's talk about eggs just a minute, and the uniformity of an egg. And Karen and I were talking about this the other day, that eggs need to really be nice and uniform if you're going to set them, not only in size, but in shape, in texture, and in color. And you would be amazed the amount of effort that the commercial poultry breeders put into selecting eggs that are all very uniform in those characteristics. They want good size, they want good shape, they want good texture, and they want good even color, particularly in something like brown shelled eggs or the blue eggs, but even white eggs, because uh, consumers today have, you tell them you got white eggs, that's what they want. They want white eggs. They don't want those tinted kind of cream colored eggs. Or if you tell them you got brown eggs, they want a nice, richly colored brown shelled egg. Karen, and I know you've got some slides that talk about this. Do you want to pop those up and
Well, I want to ask you a question first.
yeah,
You say that we need to make sure they're uniform. Do we really? I mean, it's breeder choice, isn't it? If they could care less what their eggs look like.
it is breeder choice, and I'm sorry, I was approaching that from the standpoint of
If you
improving your birds. We've got about three groups on here today. One is poultry breeders. Um, that a lot of them are working towards improving the production ability of their birds. And if that's something they have in mind, then yeah, that's something I would probably give some credence to. But if you don't care, by all means, have at it.
okay, that was all. So what slide did you want? You want the
You-
would
you
you
had-
hatch it? We'll start
Yeah.
here. There you go.
Walk us through that if you would, please.
Well, this is sort of what you were talking about. This is the super beginning easy stuff for everybody that everybody's heard 100 times. But what'd you say? Size, shape, color,
And texture.
and texture. So, all right, Alyssa, unmute yourself and tell me real quick, A or B, which one would you rather set?
Oh
Can you
no,
tell? That's my hand. So it's a relatively small hand.
it is right. But what kind of breed? Because in my head, if you have too big of an egg, that's not good either. So you said everybody's heard this. I don't think I've heard it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so egg size. So Jeff's got grams. Let's let him tell us because that's the most universal egg size.
Okay.
I tell everybody 50 to 70 grams, and 70 being borderline too large. It's really 50 to 65 grams. Now, know that the commercial industry, people aren't going to like to hear this, but commercial hatchers actually hatch medium eggs. They prefer them slightly on the smaller side because they get a better hatch rate versus the extra large eggs. So,
And just for me, I do from it's based on your breed too, right? Because I mean there are breeds that are
Right.
supposed to lay medium eggs, and there's birds that are supposed to lay extra larges. So, setting the appropriate size for your birds. But yes, I actually think if I remember that picture correctly, I actually think A is a little bit small and B is a little bit big. So that was sort of cheating there, Alyssa, that both of them were a little off.
Right.
But of the choices, knowing what I did, that B
Right.
was a
better option. Right.
2.6. No, B was actually a 2.6 ounce egg.
Oh,
So it was way too big for what my birds are supposed to lay. That's a extra
Okay.
jumbo non-sellable egg, basically.
right.
So
So then, what's the answer to that? Which would be the better egg? The one that's too small or the one that's too big?
if you wanted to hatch, probably the one that's too small. If it was only a little bit too small versus way too big. You also, in my opinion, want to check the inside of that big egg, make sure it's not a double yolker or anything.
Right. Okay.
But you also sort of have a shape problem with B, where
Right.
that's sort of not really egg shaped. That's sort of oval
Oblong.
shaped.
No.
But it's not terrible.
Okay.
All right, Rip, you want to talk about the middle two for me? 'Cause I
Well,
don't know
one
what
is
to
C
say.
and one is D. No,
Very good. Is there a color difference?
there is a color difference there to me.
Good job.
Now, if I'm remembering correctly, you told me these were both Rhode Island red eggs.
Yep.
Okay. And you use, or you don't use, but you breed standard bred reds. And every standard bred red I have ever owned laid an egg that was colored about like C, when actually what you wanted is something like D or maybe a little bit darker. And when you showed me these pictures, I commented that I knew for sure that D was laid by a red. Do you remember why I said that?
Because the shape was particular to them based on their type, which is a sentence I've never heard said before. So.
Well, not very many. You probably won't hear it from very many people. But something I remember hearing when I first got started is the shape of the egg tends to follow the shape of the breed's body. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no earthly idea. But that D egg is very much the shape of the eggs that my Rhode Island Reds laid, almost identical to it. So good job to whichever hen laid that.
I can't tell from this angle. Yeah.
Shape and color.
But for C, to me, that egg is too pointy. If you went to set it in an egg carton, it shakes around. It's long and skinny. Yeah. It's the right weight. It's a perfectly, acceptable weight. It's just not. And then when you're talking E and F, so I actually put this picture up a few years ago on the Rhode Island Red page and said that I didn't really like the speckles in my eggs. I was getting a decent chunk of speckling, and basically everybody said, who cares? Nobody cares what a Rhode Island Red eggs look like. But that was a different group of people than this.
Yeah.
So I think it's, if you love speckling in your eggs, then set for speckling in your eggs. But
well, Karen, that's like the Morans folks. Mm-hmm. It's that dark chocolate or russet red, whatever you want to call the shade of the brown. Folks really rave over, but then you've got some, and Morans will lay these speckled eggs too, that really like the speckled eggs. And we would hold egg shows, and boy howdy, about at least 30% of the time, we had an award we call People's Choice, where people could come by and vote on the eggs that they like the best. And they invariably, about 30% of the time, the People's Choice winner was speckled eggs.
I want to emphasize this from Vogel Family Farm about the shape. So, Rip, can you describe the correct shape? It's hard. I just say egg shape, which isn't really helpful because these are all eggs. So,
your egg A,
okay,
is to my eye, and Jeff, you may have another opinion here, but to me that has a nice shape egg.
What's the problem with a wrong shape of an egg? What's the problem when it comes to hatching?
I know, and here I'm going to flash back to Morans again. Their desired egg color, or egg shape, is almost round, almost golf ball shaped. And the philosophy is that shaped egg tends to stay in that part of the hen's body where they're laying down the shell color longer. So you get a darker egg from it. They can also be harder to hatch. For one thing, it's hard to tell which is the large end and where's the egg, where's the air shell. It's very difficult to tell, and those eggs can be so dark you can't handle them very well. But as far as like the C's and the D's, those kind of longer pointed eggs, I never had any real trouble hatching those unless we had an issue called porous shell in some females, and I know you got some slides. We'll talk about that later.
If somebody out there knows, I bet Ingrid knows. I think there's something about the round eggs that the chick can't get out because they can't arch up and pip correctly. Mm-hmm. Like they can't do their spin as well because they're not hitting the edge. Like they use the side of the egg to move with their one leg. Do you know what I mean? And so I think the round eggs can have.
And that could have also been some of the issues with the very round Morans egg.
But I might be making that up. It could be an old wives' tale. So I'm going to say that. Let's just get Joe's question in real quick. So given the standard for your breed, what would you think the recommended variance from egg size to set for hatch? So how I read that is sort of like the weight standard, like 20%, you know what I mean? Like 20, more than 20%, less than 20%. Any thoughts on?
I really don't. Jeff, you got any?
I was just sitting here doing the math. So Most birds fall in the 1.75 ounce to 2.25 ounce. So that gives you a total of looking for 2 ounces being your standard deviation, and with a 0.25 variable. So that would be 12.5% off of standard egg size.
All right. Well, there's an answer. I like an answer. Thank you. Mathematical answer. All right. So Jason sort of agrees told that they can't tuck the head under the wing to break out if it's something shaped. I'm not sure in there. All right. So you want to go on to, if it's.
Can I ask a quick question before we get back? Because you asked about what's the problem if the shape is corrected. It sounds like the problem is that they're going to have a hard time getting out. So what is the problem if the egg is too small or too big for the chick? I'm guessing if it's too small, the chick is going to be too small. But what about too big? Does that make sense? That question? It might be really basic, but.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question that I don't know the answer to.
On the too big, I know Sand Hill Preservation Center had some Delawares they were selecting for large egg size, and the eggs kept getting larger and larger and larger, and they started getting so many double yolked eggs they had a hard time getting enough chicks to hatch, because almost all the eggs the birds were laying were double yolked eggs. So I know it can have an impact from that aspect, Alyssa.
Okay. So a double yolked egg will not hatch.
Well, I'm not going to say will not hatch, but usually they do not.
Thank you.
And yeah, mine is only experience with my eggs that the big ones didn't. But I once set New Hampshire eggs for somebody, and their eggs were all big enough that I would not have set them, and they had an excellent hatch rate. So I feel like that was correct for that strain, and it worked for them. So.
Okay.
And my understanding is the eggs oversize. Even if they hatch, the chicks don't have great livability from the oversized eggs. There's issues in that first week, as far as chick livability.
Do you think it's related to the size of the yolk and the size of the chick?
I really don't know. That's just something I've gleaned over the years, that oversized eggs, the chicks just don't have the same strength. Same as the undersized eggs, but most people don't set a small or a medium egg or a small egg. They might set mediums, but they won't set an egg that's too small. But yeah, I was trained that the bigger eggs, there's just not good chick strength there.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
All right. If you want to go to a different slide, just for the fun of it here, this is Rip. They were just showing the texture. This is an old hen. She's 5+. And if you can see this number 9 here, every single one of her eggs has a weak rough spot on the top. And it was not like that. She didn't have that for her first 4 years, but it's getting to the point where even if I set these, hatching them doesn't work great anymore. And then Rip, what did you ask me when I showed you that picture? You said, what did her egg look like when you candled it, didn't you?
Yes.
So that's what, so her eggs is F. That's what her eggs look like. So her shell was just no longer putting it on well. So Rip, did you ever candle? Oh, speaking of, just Alyssa, since you said it, that up at the top there, that's a double yolk embryo that died.
Okay, that's interesting.
How old would you guess? I would put probably 7 days on that. I don't know. That was just it's a little picture.
Could be.
Right.
But Rip, did you candle first before you set, or?
I always candle first before I set. I wanted to make sure that obviously there were no cracks, or I didn't have a porosity problem with an egg, because invariably those are going to be the ones that will blow up on you, with my luck, when they're in the incubator. But I also wanted to check, and it was just a force of habit, and I guess from so many years of having probably 1,000 white-legged laying flock. You candled every egg just to make sure there wasn't anything unusual going on there.
Yeah. So, all right, let me bring your graphic up because that's better than this one. So, what did you call that?
These are different levels of porosity issues. Those light spots that you see on those eggshells are very thin spots in the shell, and that allows during incubation for very rapid loss of moisture from the egg itself. So that's why those eggs normally don't hatch well, and they are in order 1 through 4 from absolute worst to just sort of a minor porosity issues, and they can be brought about by so many different things: the age of the birds, the weather, stress, you name it.
Is there, other than the chance of it exploding in your incubator, is there any harm from setting these eggs like E and F?
No, you and I discussed this. I had a dynamite hen, and I desperately wanted to get some chicks off of her, and I would set every egg that she laid, and she had porosity issues, and I never got a blooming chick to hatch out of them. So, I mean, feel free to set them, but don't expect miracles.
Is there any genetics related to this porosity? So if you had hatched any of those chicks, do you think her eggs would have had those same issues?
Alyssa, I've done some research, or I shouldn't say, but delving into porosity issues, and genetics is mentioned, but it's pretty low down on the list of things that caused the problem.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
I was willing to take the chance because the hen was that good.
Okay.
And I already talked about mine get more porous as they get older, but they also get more porous as it gets hotter.
Yes.
So here, as I go into the summer, even with my new feeding regimen, my birds now lay through July into August, which they never used to do.
Well, that's a good thing.
But oftentimes their eggs, they're just getting more porous as it gets hotter. So I don't know that's just incidental,
And ambient air temperature was one of the things they mentioned that could cause porosity issues.
Karen, as you get hotter, their feed intake's going to reduce. So maybe we need to switch to a summer layer and make some adjustments to that to make sure they're getting the right amount of calcium based on the amount of feed that they're consuming every day. So if they're not cleaning up the 4 ounces that you're using, then we may need to make an adjustment to that. So Rip, your old hen that you couldn't get to hatch, how old was she?
First, I think the first time I set eggs from her, she was 3, and I tried up until the time she was 6, and I finally just threw my hands up and said, "Go your merry way."
I'm just curious, and the only thing I wanted to throw in there is all the large breeding farms, commercially speaking, all use oyster shell, or they use a calcium that has been pre-digested by another organism, like an oyster shell. So it releases better in the digestive tract. So someone who's using only limestone and limestone chips, or calcium carbonate, is not going to get the same calcium depositing as someone who is using some oyster shells as part of their calcium regimen. So,
yeah, and I've always fed oyster shells. I've not tried the limestone or any of that other stuff.
Do you think if we would have molted that hen, actually put her through a molt, we could have helped her out as far as, put her on a molt feed, drop some body weight, rebuild calcium in the bone, because if it was a really prominent layer, laid lots of eggs, she's going to wear out the calcium coming out of the bone a lot quicker than some of the other hens in the barn.
Jeff, I'm trying to think back, but had I known about managing the molt back then, and we're talking about that was back in the early 90s, I would have probably done that with my flock. And I'm sure they would have benefited from it, no doubt. But I'm trying to think. It's hard to say, you know.
I was just curious. Yeah.
I just figured it was the luck of the draw, and I had to live with it.
Well, and there's that whole breeder thing that Jeff is always bumping up against, which is if all the other chickens can manage it without special requirements, then it's hard to want a baby one if she needs something special. It's like, why does she? But you did throw out if they're a proficient layer, like if that bird is literally laying way more eggs than anybody else, then her calcium needs are going to be higher.
Well, it wasn't that she was laying any more eggs than anybody else, but my reds were atrocious layers. They laid horribly. But to your comment about doing something special, I would have done the molt management routine with the whole flock and not just one or two birds.
Yeah.
Because I see and I understand the benefit of doing that now.
All right. I don't think we need to, I guess we can put them up real quick. So this was just an example of uniformity. These are all eggs from number 17, and she laid, there's one in the bottom corner that looks like it's got a little speckling on it, or it could have been dirty. But she overall, she always has laid a very consistent egg color, which Rip enjoys. He's all for it.
I do. I was very impressed with those eggs.
I'm going to throw number 79 under the bus, though, because this is a 2-week period in which her eggshell color changed 4 times in that time. And so I said, obviously, I should just cull that girl. And then Rip said, wait, hold on. And what were all the different reasons you said that her egg color could have changed in that
it's one of the
period?
things we've been talking about. You know, it could have been temperature can impact that. Stress can impact the eggshell color. Change in feed, a change in the weather.
None of those things bothered number 17.
Oh, well, that's why I was so impressed with those eggs.
So, okay, but that's sort of a breeder thing, right? Like, I mean, if 79 is your most gorgeous bird that's winning all the shows, then you probably don't care what her egg color looks like.
If I'm only interested in showing, I don't care. Okay. But in my oldie moldy years, I have come to appreciate the benefit of producing birds or trying to produce birds that were bred for a particular purpose, whether that's meat or eggs or dual purpose, whatever. That's my goal at this point in life.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to Craig because Craig answered this for us here. But there with Craig, so he's got cochins. How do you pronounce that? Cochins, is that right?
Cochins.
So he says C would hatch, but the other ones would be. He doesn't like that cracked one. I don't know why, but but the other ones would be all too porous to hatch for him. I'll just put that comment. Get rid of that. Rid of that. Richard here is very glad that his birds have no standards. So he's about ready to make his own and then make it work. So that's a luxury and a burden. I say write that standard down. Don't be changing it every time your birds change. So, all right. Tell us more, Rip.
Egg storage, and we touched based on candling of eggs right up front. The length of time you store your eggs. Interestingly enough, really fresh eggs don't hatch as well as eggs that are about 3 days old. But did I set really fresh eggs? Yeah. I saved eggs for 7 days and set. I set eggs every Sunday. So I could pull the hatch on Mondays and mail out chicks or whatever I need to do with them. But if you're going over that 7-day threshold, you really got to pay attention to things like the temperature you're holding your eggs at. I think most folks that I've seen, the articles and studies I've seen, say 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and humidity is equally important. I'm thinking off the top of my head here, 55%, something in that neighborhood. Although I never did really worry about that. And if you're going to those longer holding periods, if you can turn your eggs much like your incubator, that will help in your hatchability as well. One of the best situations that I had, there you go. One of the best situations I've seen is a friend of mine out in Washington State, Mike Omeg, and he uses a incubator with no heat turned on in it. But he sets it to rotate, so he's constantly turning the eggs that he's holding for hatching, and he's another holds them for 7 days and sets type of person. But storage of your eggs can be critical. Tell us what you got there, Karen.
Pictures of eggs. So for me, I use a wine fridge or a beverage center. If you do go that route, I do it because my house is hot. In the summer, I can't get my older part of my house where all the incubators are. I can't get it under 82 degrees. So that's not a good storage temperature for eggs that you want to hatch. If you do go with a mechanical, though, I want to warn you, there are different ways that they work. So some of them keep a nice steady 57 degrees. Some of them go up to 65 and then down to 45 and then up to 65 and down to 45. So make sure you pay attention to what mechanism, how that brand works, if it, which type it is, because you don't want it get, drastically getting too cold all the time. But yeah, I just put them in there. I prop them up on one side, prop them up on the other. But in this time of year, I just keep them out on the desk. I just built that little holder to flop them back and forth. I often, if I'm storing a lot of hatching eggs, I use the GQF egg trays because they do stack on top of each other fairly nicely if you're careful. And that just holds the most amount of eggs. But I posted a study on Facebook today that you really can shrink wrap your eggs with the cryovac bags, and they used pumped in oxygen and had it, or nitrogen instead of oxygen. So that was a way to preserve eggs a little bit longer with a better hatching rate than with just room air. So there was an interesting discussion on whether hatching eggs need oxygen today on the Facebook.
That has sort of taken hold there. I noticed that we've had several different folks commenting about that.
Yeah, so that's not on our group, but that's on the one of the, I don't remember which group. Sorry, too many. But it was still very interesting. Yeah.
I've got one more thing I want to talk about, and then I'm just going to hush and let y'all run with it. And that's the subject of shipped eggs, because a lot of folks have eggs shipped in, and we all know, or we all should know, that shipping eggs in and of itself is a huge risk. Eggs can get broken, they can get cracked, or as my grandmother would have said, they can just plain get addled. But that is one case where I always make sure that I candle those eggs, because the egg may look perfect from the outside, and you throw it up to the candle and you got these little tiny fine hairline cracks in it. You can touch that up a little bit with nail polish, clear nail polish, and save them that way. But the one thing that's terribly important that you do if you're getting eggs shipped in is don't put them in the incubator immediately. Let them set out, small end down, big end up, air cell end up, for 24 hours before you set them in your incubator. Because what can happen is, going back to my grandmother's addled eggs, in handling, those air cells can become detached. They're attached up at the top of the big end, but if they get detached, they will actually float around within the egg, and those chicks can drown if they can't find that air cell. So I always set shipped eggs large end up, and that's from day 1 to day 21. That's my 2 cents.
That's why I left Stan's comment up there for so long, because we yet have said to store them pointy end down. So but you got it. So there you go.
So Rip, real quick, you said you don't set them immediately. How long
No.
do you wait?
24 hours.
24 hours. Okay.
That will allow, if that egg air cell has become detached, that will allow that air cell to come back up to the top of the egg and sort of reposition itself. It won't reattach, and that's the reason for incubating it right side up, but it will come back up to the top. So Jeff and Alyssa, tell us about the dietary needs for our breeding birds.
That's all. You got 5 minutes. Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
have all the time he wants to.
Well, unfortunately, there's not really any great breeder feeds on the market that I've seen. There's some that come close. And, everybody focuses on the protein part because that's the first thing listed on the label. And they need to look past that. And they need to look at the vitamin levels, and they need to look at the amino acid levels, and get the best that you can find. Not the best that you can afford. Actually use the best that you can find, or find something to supplement it to bring that up. And, there's plenty of information out there. Anybody can go find it, that vitamin A and E are going to be critical for that chick to come out of that egg and be healthy and help the vigor. But so are the trace minerals, so are the B vitamins. All that stuff's getting transferred through the yolk to that chick. And if the hen isn't getting it, the chick ain't going to get it. And, and I hear people get on the phone with me and they're like, I lost 20% of my hatch. They couldn't pip out, or they couldn't do this, or they couldn't do that. And part of me feels sorry for them. And then part of me doesn't, because they cut corners. They tried to save some money because they'd rather keep 10 more birds than they really should, and instead of buying the right feed. And, I can't fix that, but, get the best you can find. And that doesn't mean what's at local Tractor Supply. Get the best that you can find, to make sure that your hens are getting everything that they need. It takes about 21 days, actually, of feeding ahead of collecting that egg to make sure that those chicks are going to hatch out. If you got really expensive chicks that you're going to be selling, make the investment. At least one time out of the year, make that investment. Karen feeds hers really high nutrition for the hatching season. And as soon as she's done hatching, she switches over to a regular layer feed and just collects eggs for selling to the neighbors. And that's perfectly fine. You don't have to feed expensive feed year round, but you should at least feed it through the breeding season.
Good job.
I tried to be as politically correct as I could.
You need to correct anything he said?
No, I think that was all pretty accurate. I like, Jeff, that you pointed out that during those 21 days when their nutrient levels need to be the highest, like you don't have to feed that all year long, because vitamins and high, like a quality protein source is gonna be expensive or a little more costly than a standard layer feed. So I don't really have anything else to add.
All right, I've got some questions here.
Ooh.
So, from Richard. So I read something saying storing eggs air sac down gave a something chicks hatching.
Do you think that's heavier?
Heavier? Oh, that is heavier.
I have not heard that. I've never heard that, so I can't speak to that.
What does that mean? Like the chicks themselves were heavier, or like it was harder for them to hatch?
I'm assuming he's talking about the chicks were heavier.
I actually feel like this year I also read something about storing eggs the opposite way down than what everybody stores them, but I don't remember why. Maybe it's so you can get heavier. So I'm sorry, Richard. We were not able to answer. All right. Jason, do you clean or sterilize the eggs before putting them in the incubator?
I do not. If I have a dirty egg, I don't put it in the incubator. Or if I've had to wash it, I don't put it in the incubator. And part of this is because I'm old school, and that's the way I was taught. Because if you wash an egg or you clean an egg, you're taking the bloom off of the egg, and the bloom is one of the purpose of that bloom is to keep bacteria from infiltrating into the inner part of the egg. So that's why I don't do it.
All right, Ken, I'm going to argue with you right now. So I do.
And
I sanitize anybody's eggs that aren't mine before they go in my incubator. So there's, it's just a biosecurity thing. I don't like to do it anyway, but if I am, they're going to get sanitized. So I use Tektrol just because it's on the actual instructions. The hatching egg sanitizer is on the bottle. So it's a, use thing. And I will actually do it to my own if it's that precious egg that Rip was dying to hatch. But I'll do it to any egg that was laid on the ground. So I put a mark if I don't collect it out of the next box and I put it on even if it doesn't look dirty, if it was on the ground, I'll sanitize that before I put it in. But a lot of that is just, I don't want it exploding and ruining everything else. Because even if they don't explode, even if they just ooze, the gas they emit is going to kill, in my experience, not scientific, it'll kill every egg around it. Do you know what I mean? That noxious stuff coming out of that egg is being absorbed by all the eggs that are close, top, bottom, sides. And so it's going to kill, even before it explodes, it causes a worse hatch rate for me. So I do. And lots of people use gold Listerine? Is that it? It's Listerine, but it's got to be the old school one. Am I the only one hearing this? Somebody.
I've not heard that.
Somebody tell me on the chat, but
bleach solution. But I'm telling you, I'm old school, and we didn't know about these newfangled things.
Well, a lot of it. That's why we work so hard to keep them clean, right? That's why you work so hard to keep laying in the nest box so that your eggs are clean to begin with. Alyssa's questioning, but she's muted, so we can't.
Sorry, I was thinking about the Listerine and the alcohol in there, and what that would do. That was my thinking face. Sorry.
There you go. Okay. Did we do this one? Is it better to hatch with the egg laying on its side or upright with the pointy side down? This depends on what incubator and hatcher you have, right? You're not always going to have a choice.
I have done both.
Okay.
And I have done on the side for more years than I have upright. But, I've gotten equally good results hatching the pointy end down as I have laying them on their sides. I think one reason I kept them on the side for so long was because that's, I've never seen a hen yet go around and line up set up all her eggs pointy end down before she hatches them. But
you have lazy hens.
Well, they don't know up from down anyway. So,
all right. So just back to Richard. Yes, chicks are heavier at hatching, is what it was saying. And then somebody is providing a link on the Facebook group. So if you want to go read that study that Richard was asking about, it's there. Looks like there's enough information to Google it too. So that's good. Be quiet. All right. So somebody's asking about the Tektrol. Do I use that to sterilize my incubator? I do. I also use oxine and some other things. But yes, since I've got it inside for the hatching, that is what I use to clean my incubator. Hatcher. Chase has heard of using hydrogen peroxide for cleaning eggs as well. I also, Jeff, Pat, she used Dawn dish detergent. It's like she was washing her dishes and had an excellent hatch rate out of her egg. So,
yeah, as long as you don't get carried away, if you're using a really mild solution, I can believe that. It's just, you got to be careful, how much of the bloom you're removing. You just want to be quick as you can and not too much exposure.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Yes, old stool Listerine Gold is excellent. So thank you, Poultry. She told us earlier what that stood for, and she, and I already forgot. But
Karen, can you put Craig Hanson's comment back up there?
which one? The expensive eggs?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to make a comment about shipping eggs, and I discovered it quite by accident. I was having eggs shipped from Washington State to me here in Florida, and I thought, gee whiz, that's a long way to ship eggs, and hope they're going to not get bashed around too much. But I somehow hit on the idea of having the guy. He wrapped the eggs individually in bubble wrap, and then I sent him a box like you would ship live poultry in. And this was before they made them reduce the sizes of it, but I just sent him a single bird box and asked him to pack a layer of packing peanuts, a layer of eggs, small end down, layer of packing peanuts till he got up, filled up the box with them, and then to put a piece of cardboard and tape it in place so that the eggs wouldn't bounce up and down and wiggle back and forth. And I went, I got a call from the postmaster, and he said, "You need to get down here right away." I said, "Why?" He said, "Your birds are here and they're dead." I said, "What do you mean my chickens are there and they're dead?" He said, "They're not making any sound." And when I went down to pick them up, it was the box of eggs. Of course, I was pretty sure what it was, and I kind of laughed, and I told him what it was. He looked at me and he said, "You're genius." That kept us from screwing them up, because when it says live birds emblazoned all over the side of the box, and it has a convenient handle on the top of it, they don't get routed through the conveyor system nearly as much as they do in a regular box. So if you ship eggs, or you're asking somebody to ship you some eggs, you might want to give that a try.
Jeff, there's a lot of questions. Do you want to try to just cover feed and brands of feed and all that? Anything live, or are you doing it on the side there?
I answered it on the side. They asked me what brand I highly recommended, and I sent them a link and told them where to go. And
okay, all right. I know there was a whole spew there real quickly about feed, so I just want to make sure we didn't ignore you. All right, so how about this? Is it better to clean eggs that have had yolk on them, or just leave them?
Personally, I would clean that off rather than just leave it on there.
I'd say that's the one thing that'll guarantee it won't hatch. I feel like that yolk just clogs up all those pores.
Yeah.
That's my worst. I was collecting hatching eggs to bring today. In case you notice, I'm in someplace different. I'm at the lovely Rebecca's house, and 2 days ago I dropped my whole thing. Only broke like 3 eggs, but I feel like I ruined all the other ones because they all ended up with the yolk on them. But
I think if you can get it off fairly quickly, you got a better chance of saving them. But if it has a chance to dry on there, that becomes a bit of a challenge.
All right, so Brian, we're throwing away all the big names in this one. So Craig is saying that Brian, so everybody of importance agrees that he puts the eggs in the legal live box. So
yeah.
All right. There is one about, this is sort of more incubation, but how frequently do you clean your cabinet incubator, and what's a good recommended cleaning product? Rip, what do you do?
Every time I have a hatch of chicks come off, I clean it and I sanitize it. And I use Oxine just because somebody gave me a gallon of it, and it has lasted me forever. But in any I think disinfectant that's safe to use around poultry is probably a good product to use in your incubator. I wouldn't recommend what they used to do back in the teens and 20s and use formaldehyde and potassium permanganate, because that generates a lot of very noxious, poisonous gas, and it will get you. So don't do that.
All right. I want to. Can I ask a question that I asked on the group that everybody rushed to answer? That made me feel like I should have looked it up before I asked. So, in order for a hatching egg to hatch, it has to be fertile. And I get that. Okay, so the fertilization takes place in the, all right, Jeff, this is a U word, infundibulum. Is that right? So that's the place that catches the yolk, right as it's like a muscle. So it goes out and catches the yolk, or sort of grabs it, sucks it, catches it. A little weird in there. But they say it has like just a few minutes that's where the sperm needs to be. It needs to go into that ovary or into that yolk before the egg white starts being put on. Okay. So the sperm, however, we remember everybody talks about all these little weird, scraggly, pockety things where the sperm can live for 30 days, 7 months if you talk to some people. But how in the world does the sperm know when to be down there waiting and up there getting in that ovary or in that egg? Anyone? Magic? God?
Google Calendar.
Personally, I'm not convinced that it's only stored in the eggshell gland. So,
Okay.
I think it's constantly migrating up the oviduct, during that entire 7 days. Okay,
That
so
would make sense.
there's constantly some, moving up through the oviduct. The majority of it may sit down at the eggshell gland, but to say that it's just sitting there waiting for one of them to race up to the top is not,
Okay.
Yeah,
So you think the whole
Yeah.
thing is just alive with everything swimming everywhere, just hoping to be the right one at the right time?
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay. But anyway, thank you everybody for helping me with that, because I was very confused as to how after the shell gets put on and goes down through the vagina, how could it possibly be fertilized at that point? I felt really stupid. All right. So everybody talking about what products they use. Perfect. I want to see, this is sort of an overview comment, but all of these little things with hatching eggs, it's all incremental. Tons of people they can pick their eggs up out of the dirt, leave them in the dirt for 3 days, and then pick them up and then put them in their styrofoam incubator that they bought for $13 that has no fan, and their eggs hatch perfectly. Do you know what I mean? Lots of hatching goes on easily, and lots of hatching is very, very difficult. So it's all incremental based on whether you're having a problem or not. Don't you think? I mean, when you have a young, healthy birds that are eating the right thing, they do a pretty good job of hatching, don't they?
I think some of it too is based on the climatic conditions of where the individual lives. What do they deal with for a relative humidity on a regular basis? Is it high or is it low? There's so many factors, and some folks just seem to have the knack or be in the right spot at the right time, whatever you want to say, or just really blessed that they do a really good job hatching, and there's other folks who really struggle with some issues. There's just a lot of variables, and I hope we will be able to do a show on incubation and also fine tuning an incubator. I think the folks would get a lot out of that.
All right. Craig says if he AIs immediately after an egg is laid, 90% plus of the time, the next egg will be fertile. So he puts those little swimmers in there right after the egg is laid, and they go find their target.
Well, Craig would be my go-to guy on that particular on AI subjects, because he's probably mastered it as well as anybody I've ever seen.
So Jason got himself a $5 incubator. Probably works great.
Go, Jason. Good for you. I've never been that lucky.
Let's see. The only other thing, I'm just going to put this slide up because I have it, is if you need to store your eggs for longer, and especially if your birds are young, don't give in. Don't just give up if you didn't get them hatched. I really didn't have too much trouble. This is all the way up to 19 days of storage. And this is over a good flock of time, a decent chunk of time. And it just didn't make a very big difference. Early deaths definitely went up, but it just didn't make a huge difference on whether they would hatch or not, whether it was, and notice this is at the beginning, that's the dip Rip talked about, where fresh eggs just laid that day or within 12 hours, they just don't hatch well at all. You know what I mean? But just give them a try. If you've got them and you just didn't get around to it, don't throw them away automatically. So, I have one more thing to say, but you guys have to talk first while I remember it. Say goodbye. Oh, what are we going to talk about next week?
Oh, next week. Let's see. We're going to be talking about spizzerictum. Not next week, but in 2 weeks. Do your birds have spizzerictum? Do you know what spizzerictum is? Spizzerictum is vigor. And I remember my grandmother and my aunt using that term on a regular basis. And honestly, I thought for many years it was a term that they made up, but it is an actual word, and that's what it means, vigor. So we're going to be talking about how you can improve the vigor in your flock.
And do we have a guest?
Working on that. Yes, we do have a guest. David Keaton.
All right. Anything to add, Jeff, Alyssa?
I don't think so.
All right.
Nope. It was good.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the questions and comments.
I appreciate everybody helping each other because there's more knowledge in that chat section than we have on screen. So I really appreciate everybody who attends and helps everybody else. So
teamwork makes the dream work.
The one thing that has always impressed me about not only this group, but Jeff's group and the four of us is we all work together. We all learn from each other. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So everybody, thank you for watching. Hope you'll join us in 2 weeks. And until then, you have a great time and enjoy your birds. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation by Poultry Keepers 360. All rights are reserved. This production has been made possible in part through the generous support of the Fur Trail Company, manufacturers of gardening and livestock products that are better naturally.